Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny, and this is We Gotta Talk, a live weekly digital talk show and podcast where we like to dig deep. Real talk, big topics. Now, let's dig in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Gotta Talk, where it's all about real talk on big topics. We are getting serious today and helping you work through trauma. We love a good self-improvement moment, right? Today's guest is Cody Isabel. He is a coach, the co-founder and CEO of Rewrite and Rise, which is a program helping people work through trauma and stress to show up as a healthy person. Rewrite and Rise uses neuroscience, AI, and neurotechnology to objectively measure and improve mental and emotional well-being. Cody, welcome to the show, and thank you for being on here after I found you on Instagram and tracked you down.
Heck yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm pumped up.
I'm sure that's how most people find you because your work it's impactful. I would say in like the 4 seconds it took me to scroll through my feed, your content really caught my eye. So good stuff.
Heck yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The amount of people are like, "Oh my gosh, are you from TikTok or LinkedIn?" It's it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know there are a lot of people in your space who are in the mental and emotional well-being space, whether it be coaches, motivational speakers, people who are in natural medicine or, regular medicine. What makes Rewrite and Rise so special? Because there is something that's resonating through your social media presence and through your programs that's obviously really working.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things is our controversial perspective is that not everybody needs like therapy, like hardcore therapy. Understanding and learning about like my background's neuroscience. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm a cognitive behavioral. I love it, like how your mind affects your behavior. And so really helping people understand their mind, brain, and body and how those three things work together. And then putting data to those things, I think is really one of the biggest differentiators. So it's much more empowering. It's less, I have to go get help from somebody. The problem and solution are inside of you. So,
Oh, that's so interesting. I want to know more about your background in neuroscience. There's so much that's coming out and available to the public now that we do have social media. I'm thinking of Huberman Lab right off the top of my head. It's like
I love him. Yeah.
obviously like an MVP in the space. For some reason, Cody, when I hear people tell me that my brain is working just how it's supposed to be working, even though it feels like it's malfunctioning, it is a source of great relief. It's such a complex mechanism that it obviously literally runs our lives. Tell us like the most surprising thing you've learned in all of your years studying neuroscience.
Hmm. That's a good question. One of the most surprising things, I would say, some of the most surprising things is in relation to like perception, which is a lot of what I deal with, especially around anxiety, depression, stress. Um, the amount of information your brain is taking in every second is crazy, like 6 trillion bits of information every second you're taking in, but you can only consciously be aware of about 126 of those bits. And so it's that's one of the craziest things that I've ever understood, like how much information we're sifting through. And then along that same line, how much of that information is coming bottom up from our body to our brain, which is about 80% of the information that we process is coming from our body to our brain, not top down. And that's a lot of what traditional therapy, I feel like, gets somewhat confused. People come to
Okay.
us.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. No, you're right. When therapy, we're working from the brain down. We're verbalizing our concerns or issues, and we're hoping that it has an impact on our depression or anxiety or stress. What
Mhm.
do you mean by a bottom up approach?
So your bottom up is going from your body to your brain to your mind. So if you think of your mind, it's just like a messaging center, a notification center, it's just like your phone. It's a notification center for what's going on in your body. And so when you're going bottom up, you're going from your body. So whether it's feeling your butt on the chair or your shirt on, right, that's your body. Then it sends a signal through your nerves to your brain, and then your brain is like, mind, this is what's going on. Your mind is like, ah, this is awesome. You touch a hot stove, right? It goes from your finger through your nerves through to your brain into your mind, and you're like, ow, that hurt. And so that's going bottom up as opposed to top down. And that's 80% of what you're doing daily is bottom
So
up.
how can we begin to work in that direction then? I mean, you gave a good example. We don't want to be running around touching hot stoves to learn lessons, but I would imagine this is where things like meditation or, physically calming exercises would come into play. I'm interested in knowing how we work from the body first to calm the mind.
Awareness is a big piece, like a huge piece first. Um, a lot of, especially a really good example is anxiety, because it's very
Mm.
much a bodily thing. And I work with anxiety, especially trauma. Trauma replicates or appears or can come on like anxiety. But so awareness that these things are generated, stored, and felt in your body is like the number one thing. And then being able to start to call them out and name them is something that's really, really easy. It's not too kumbaya, and it's really like an easy thing that you can start to do. So naming the things that are going on and the emotions. Happy to dive deeper if you'd like.
Yeah, let's start there. And you talked about anxiety, which I feel like is something that a lot of us deal with at one point in our lives or another. So when I feel anxious and my chest might tighten or might
Mm,
start to breathe really shallow, or some people might go into a full blown panic attack.
yep.
When we're sort of doing this reverse approach and we're like working from the body up through the brain to the mind, what are some immediately grounding things we can begin to do to sort of take our body out of that experience?
Yeah, so anxiety is a hyper body thing. Like, so the feeling of anxiety makes you think, I'm going to die. Well, anxiety really is the fear of fear, the fear of fear. It's kind of a meta thing, because the feeling of people are so not in their body, they're so processing in their head, they're so not in their body that when their heart goes up, their palms get sweaty, their breathing changes, it freaks them out. Like, oh, I'm going to die. That's it. Peace out,
Right.
Cody. Like, it's over. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just the fear of fear. And so the first thing that I suggest to people, especially for anxiety, is to name it. So, like for example, here in Kansas City, there's a roller coaster that's called the Mamba, and so I've named my anxiety the Mamba. And so whenever it gets here, because anxiety is something I struggle with a little bit, and something that I've named mine is the Mamba. And so whenever I get freaked out, I welcome it. I'm like, oh, what is up, Mamba? How are you doing? Like, thank you so much for being here. I know you're here to protect me, because something that people forget is that's a part of you. Anxiety is a part of you, whether you like it or not. It's a part of you that's there to protect the whole, right? So that part of you is trying to protect all of you in some way. And whatever it's doing, it's trying to protect you. And so what a lot of people do is they shove down anxiety and they're like, go away, go away, go away, go away. Like I've worked with somebody, I don't know if I could cuss on this podcast, but they named their
Yes.
anxiety, beautiful. They named their anxiety that bitch. And I was like, what? And that was a part of her that she was calling and being that rude to. Like, you walk out into public and you call someone that bitch, are they going to like go away, ignore you, or are they going to get louder and be like, what the hell did you just say to me? And they start yelling it, right? Same thing with your anxiety, same thing with that part of you. And so people try to push it away, push it away, push it away. And that makes it worse. It's like pushing a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to erupt back up and explode. And so, by naming it, like Mamba, you can start to welcome it and say, what is up? Thank you so much for showing up here. And the moment that you name something, neurologically, you're shifting your brain's ability to freak out less, because the moment
Mhm.
that you name it and you're welcoming it, now your brain is like, oh my gosh, like Cody's not freaking out right now. He's not scared of what's happening to him. I don't have to label this as anxiety. I can ramp down my autonomic nervous system, my fight or flight response, which is causing you to feel the anxiety. And the second you name it and call it out and welcome it, you can start to release its grip on you.
Okay, so let's walk through that. You know what? I want to get back into your history and your background too, so don't let me forget that. But let's walk through that as an exercise, because when I introduce something, I really want to make sure that we got some good takeaways. So I'm experiencing an anxious episode. Say I'm walking into a place where I know that, I don't know, someone that I've had a conflict with in the past is going to be, and I'm noticing the same things I mentioned. My stomach is kind of clenching, my chest is kind of clenching, I'm not breathing right. I name the anxiety. I say, okay, thank you, anxiety, for showing up. I know you're doing your best to try to protect me from something that I perceive to be a threat. And then what do I do?
Yeah, that's perfect. So, I guess two steps back. If we want a full blown process, it's something I call Muse,
Mhm.
MEWS. So the first thing is movement. In the M is the M. Um, E is externalize. So movement is moving your body around. Movement starts to break up the chemicals that create anxiety in your body. So they start to eat away the cortisol and the epinephrine and that stuff. So being able to move, and whether that's tapping your arms, like you could be tapping your arms, you could go like this, you could shake your hands. If you shake your hands enough, your hands will start to feel tingly. That's the
Yeah.
blood coming back in. So that's movement. Externalize is focusing on a point, like just put a point in the wall or a marker or something right on the wall. If you're in like a coffee shop, like you explained, find some point in the wall that you can focus on, then welcome the anxiety. So whatever you've named your anxiety, I've heard all sorts of things. Welcome it. Hey, what's up? Thanks so much for being here. And then do, you talked about Dr. Huberman. He has his sigh breathing method. So 2 in your nose, 1 out your mouth, like, and really focus on breathing out. That shortens the space your heart has in your diaphragm to pump. So it slows your heart rate down. When your heart rate slows down, pretty much the rest of your body follows. So you'll calm down a little bit. Or box breathing is another really easy one that people, I'm sure you've heard of that, but it's just breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and then you do that and just do that for 90 seconds, 30 seconds, 90 seconds, and that emotion will pass, and you will be more okay. And then act in that moment when you're feeling the calm is action. That's one of the biggest things that I am huge on is behavioral activation. Like your behaviors change your response to anxiety more than anything. So go do the thing.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love that. Hey, what is your background? I meant to ask you this early on, but we got so into it right away. You said you study neuroscience, and I know you work with a co-founder as well at your company. So you guys sort of bring your distinct skills to the table and the ways that you work with your clients. But tell us what you studied and how you even came to find this as, your life calling, essentially.
Yeah, so my background is cognitive behavioral neuroscience, and so what that simply means is like the way that you think, how the way that you think, sorry, and what's happening in your physical brain, like physiologically, how that affects your behavior. And so I
Mm,
really, really love researching and learning about that kind of stuff. I started, I kind of got into this during the pandemic, actually, during COVID. I started working with young people, especially like 20 somethings. As just really at first it just started as kind of going back and forth, like they're scared to touch doorknobs. Like, how do I deal with anxiety,
mm.
stress, depression, or behavioral change? That's a huge part of brain science, like what habits, patterns, routines, things that you do. And so it kind of started there. And then my co-founder, Gwen, she's an awesome, she's a badass. You guys should interview her next. She's awesome. Her and I kind of came together, and she has this background in engineering, bioengineering, bioinformatics. And so understanding the information the body is giving off and how to use that, and AI and machine learning, those types of technologies. And we kind of came together and put what I knew about the brain and science and people, and what she knew about engineering, algorithms, those types of things together. And created Rewrite and Rise, which is kind of where we're at today. It's been really, really fun. So we have machine learning algorithms that are very similar to the brain. I won't get too super technical, but they analyze data the same way your brain analyzes data. And so we started using things like Whoop or like Apple Watch. I've got sensors all over me, but data to start to help people predict their mental and emotional health, and start to be able to help them understand what's happening, their believability scores, like what is anxiety, when do I feel anxious, like those types of things. And so making the data of their body actionable to them, as opposed to you're 6'6". Okay, that doesn't help me
Mhm.
really. I'm just my height. But in when you go to family gatherings and you're around this person, your heart rate is here, and when you're around this person, your heart rate is here. Here's what that could mean. Different things like that, to where we can start to analyze their data and start to help them with our brain programs. So it's those two halves that kind of got Gwen and I into what we're doing now.
I love it. I have to be candid with you. I hear AI and I immediately recoil. I think of the robots taking over the world. I think of an unholy union between big tech and our precious, precious personal information.
Oh,
But
yes.
hearing you, which I feel like is a separate conversation, but in this way, it seems like you're taking biofeedback essentially and using it to predict behavioral patterns and sort of therefore help us improve things. So it sounds a little less intense. But tell us about how you marry AI with that mental health sort of coaching, because like we mentioned before, we do have specific things that happen in our bodies when we're anxious or
Mm-hmm.
not feeling great. So how does your program, what are we measuring with your program that is giving you that information that in turn helps you improve that patient's health?
So there's a bunch of things we measure. Biometrics is probably the most objective and easy to understand. So it's like heart rate variability, like heart rate, respiration rate, blood ox, things, or like blood oxygen, percent of
Mhm.
oxygen in your blood, things like that. And so that's some of the data we're collecting biometrically. And then the other data is through the coaching and stuff that we do, or the programs that we do with people. So psychographic information, like Myers-Briggs is a really basic example. DISC, like Enneagram. There's so many of the things that people kind of take personality wise, psychographic information wise, and then what people subjectively report to us in session, and then objective measurements. And so one of the easiest ways, or easy example of one of the things we can do, is believability scores,
Mm.
because we work a lot on beliefs that people have. And so, for example, somebody might not believe that they have a meditative practice, but their biometrics and their objective report says that they do have a meditation practice. And the problem, if you don't believe that you have a meditation practice, you don't get the benefits of that meditation practice. And so, like, there's a really awesome study out of Stanford, a colleague of Dr. Huberman's actually, that did this with housemaids, or not housemaids, but at hotels. Like, they come and clean the rooms and stuff. And what they did is they had none of these maids at first knew that the stuff that they're doing was like pulling the bed, cleaning the sheets, clean all the stuff, was exercise. They didn't believe it was exercise. And so what they did is they split the group in half, and one group, they started posting little Post-it notes all over the rooms they were working in, and telling them, like, this burns this many calories. The Surgeon General considers this amount of exercise, and helping them start to understand the activities they were doing, the amount of stairs and steps and all the stuff is exercise. And so that's what they did for one group. The other group, they left completely alone, the control group. After the study, what they found is that the group that they shift the belief in that it is exercise, their body weight went down, their body fat went down, their HRV went down. Like, almost every measurement of health improved in the group that believed they were exercising. And so that's a huge problem that people run into when we're working with them, that data can help them create that belief, just like the maids got. That's the same thing that we can do with our clients, because a lot of times they're doing exercise, they just don't realize it.
Why is it so hard for us to switch that though? Because that mindset, that strength of mindset is something that keeps coming up on this podcast. We've interviewed experts in manifestation or coaching, and there seems to be this unifying theme that if you believe it, it will be true or can be true. But so many of us refuse to lean in still because it sounds too good to be true. So, I guess that's proof of mental blocks that we need to get through. But tell me more about the power of the mind and the power of a good mind shift.
Yeah, I love, I work a lot with like Reiki instructors, manifest, all the quantum, all this stuff, right? Because they want me to come in and be like, can you explain neuroscience behind this? Like, and absolutely, yes, I can. And that's why I love, because I work with a lot of guys too that don't want the kumbaya, they just want the rational stuff. And so beliefs are protective in some way, almost always. And so I use something called the belief wheel to help people understand this. And it's really simple. There's 4 pieces of the belief wheel. At the very top, imagine the belief wheel like a circle of arrows.
Mhm.
Okay, at the very top are beliefs. So like what's a good one? Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy could be a belief, right? And what that makes them feel then, so the next arrow down is feelings and thoughts. So that
Mhm.
belief makes you feel guilty, shameful, nervous, worried, anxious, scared, whatever, in relation to, what's a really common one, submitting a work assignment or something like that, or getting something in on time. But you feel like you're not good enough, not worthy, not smart enough. That's your belief, which makes you feel in relation to that work task, nervous, worried, anxious, scared, guilty, shameful, which makes you then think, I'm not smart enough, I can't do this, they don't like me, I'm going to get fired, what all of those ants, those automatic negative thoughts start to come in.
Mhm.
And so the feelings make the thoughts worse, the thoughts makes the feelings worse. And then what happens is, to get away from those feelings, this is the third step of the belief wheel at the very bottom, is action or inaction. And so what happens is those feelings and thoughts suck. And so you want to cope. So what do? You procrastinate, right?
Mhm.
And so the perfectionist or the person that doesn't feel good enough, they procrastinate to cope, or they drink, or they smoke, or they, whatever it is. And that's the actions that they're taking. And so then what does that do? The assignment that they need to put in, or that they need to submit, they wait till the last minute to do it. And so then the result is something that's actually not good enough. And the kicker of all of this is, because of the action or the choice that they made to procrastinate, they got a shitty result. And so that reinforces the belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And then you go back around the cycle. And so it's a self-fulfilling it reinforces itself over and over and over again, until you can shift that belief through, there's two ways you can shift it: through action, which is behavioral activation. We could talk about that.
Mm.
And belief, like a real belief shift, just like the nuns. Like, it's not always that hard to shift a belief. Almost everybody has had a moment in their life where they believed one thing, and then literally seconds later, they believe something different. Just like the nun, or not the nun, sorry, the maids. I don't know, I keep saying nuns. The maids, uh, the second they started seeing those post-it notes, their belief shifted, right? And so they started reinforcing something new. Now that they believed it was exercise, their feelings and thoughts shifted to, holy crap, I'm getting exercise. This is awesome. This is exciting. Their thoughts were, I'm doing a workout right now. I'm exercising right now. And so then the actions they're taking are, maybe they're working a little bit harder. Maybe they're doing some different thing, right? So they're taking different actions, which then gets them the result of the exercise, which reinforces the belief that this is exercise. And that's how that's your subconscious working towards you and for you, putting that same belief wheel on your team as opposed to against you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It reminds me a lot of the work I did with my medical anxiety, which I've talked about in jest and in seriousness on this podcast before, where they gave you that wheel, they gave an imagery in the classwork that we were given of exactly what you said, thought, action, and sort of consequence. And what I try to visualize as I work through that particular issue of mine is like breaking in on the wheel and saying, okay, just because I have this thought or anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that this is true or that this is going to happen. But I have trouble, Cody, breaking in on that part of the wheel. To me, it sounds like I'm trying to break in on the belief part of it. But for some reason, because maybe that's a very well-worn path in my brain, and this is just one example, but it is really hard to break into that cycle and sort of cut that in half. What advice do you have for people who are aware of the circle and cycle that they're in, but need to break through on that belief part?
Right. So I pretend is adults, just kids wearing a costume. And so something I really help people a lot with is creating a hero who has different beliefs than you. And so, for example, when I am public speaking, or even right now, for example, I am pretending to be Tony Robbins. He's a freaking hero of mine. I love him. I met him in high school, or I didn't meet him in high school. Sorry, I found his work in high school. And so what I start to do is, because your brain is all, what would Sony do? What would Sony do? What would Sony do? What would Cody do? What would Cody do? All the time, it's trying to predict your behavior. And so right now, what my brain is doing, instead of saying Cody, it's saying Tony. What would Tony do? How would Tony answer that? What would Tony, like, how would he show up on this podcast? Would he let some computer malfunction mess him up? No, he'd get his iPad and figure it out, right? And so that's Tony. And I'm acting and believing differently because I'm pretending to be my hero, which is Tony Robbins. And so I help people create heroes so they can take different actions, and those heroes have different beliefs. And the beautiful thing is, when they have different beliefs, I'm doing it right now. I'm acting through it. It's just like a really simple, ridiculous example: skydiving, right? Most people would have a hard time cracking through the belief that I shouldn't jump out of planes. It's a pretty good belief to not jump out of airplanes that are flying 20,000 feet in the air. However, when you start to skydive, what happens? When you go for the first time, your feelings and thoughts are like, I am freaking terrified. You have the belief I shouldn't jump out of planes. But then after you take the action of jumping out of the plane, like Will Smith talks about this a lot, like, so that, like, as far as taking that jump, once you take that jump and you land on the ground and you survive, that's a new result. And so then the belief now becomes, oh, maybe I can jump out of planes with a parachute, with an instructor, when I'm skydiving. And then the next time, the feelings and thoughts are not as bad. And then you take the
Mhm.
action again, you get the same result, and you're safe again. And it starts to shift that belief. And so by creating a hero to help you take action and have different beliefs, you start to be, at the end of the day, it's a costume you're wearing. I'm wearing Tony, but Cody is acting. And so I am reshifting and changing the beliefs in my head through that action with my hero. Does that make
I
sense?
love that's it, at total sense. It's the Sasha Fierce theory with Beyonce. She says, "When I get on stage, I'm not Beyonce, I'm Sasha Fierce." And
Exactly.
embodying that version of herself obviously helped her achieve great success. It's so interesting to me. I feel like this is something I need to practice. Because you're right, it's so easy for us to believe that other people are capable of that great action, or other people are capable of making this change, but not little old me. But when you start to think of it outside of yourself, it's such a valuable tool.
100% agree. Yeah,
I,
it's crazy.
I got a quick question that we have live here. I'm just going to throw this in before we move on. Fiona is asking, is overthinking a cause or effect of anxiety?
Is overthinking a cause or effect? Overthinking would be in the, I guess it would be, what are you specifically overthinking? But if you're thinking of, it's a feedback loop. So when you overthink, it makes you feel a certain way, which makes you think more, which makes you feel more, think more, and you go back and forth in that hyper loop of feelings and thoughts. And so that's a lot of the time what overthinking becomes, I would say. And so it's kind of both because in anxiety specifically, like I said, is the fear of fear. And so the hyper thinking about the fear and, oh, heart tight chest means heart attack. You start to overthink all and catastrophize. That creates more fear. And so I wouldn't I would say it is part of anxiety. It's hard to say if it's a cause or effect because it's kind of both, which is a bad answer. I feel like a lawyer, but
No, 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 not at all. Listen, I think these are really complicated subjects. Let me rephrase it and ask you this way. If we're experiencing overthinking and it's associated with some anxiety for us, what are some ways to break through?
yeah, that's okay. That's a good, very good question. So overthinking, I would suggest, depending on what you're overthinking, like if it's a health thing, if it's like a decision, that's a huge one. Action is still what I would suggest. The hardest part that people they worry that taking an action or making a decision, it's the end game, but it's
Mm.
not, right? And so shifting, what I suggest for people in that situation is to shift action in their mind from one single thing to a circle of things. So action, you go from acting to assessing the action to adjusting to acting again. Act, assess, adjust. Act, assess, adjust. So it's always a learning process. So no matter
Hmm.
what decision you make, no matter what you do, you are always getting back to, oh, I can make a new decision, I can make a new action. And so I would suggest shifting from action by itself to the triad of act, assess, adjust.
Love that. Let's move on to the concept of trauma. We so far have focused on things that we might have relative control over in addressing our anxieties, our worries, but trauma is something that impacts us all. And I love this explanation that I got from a rapid transformational therapy expert that I worked with. And she, like many people, calls them big T traumas and little t traumas. And what was
Heck
interesting
yeah.
to me as she explained that, yeah, is that we all have some form of trauma in our lives. And whether we're dealing with it or not, it seems to be a cause of a lot of people's depression, anxiety, or worries. And in some cases, it gets us into even bad behavioral patterns. So, what do we do about those problems, Cody, that happen to us? Things that we aren't in control over. And this could be how we were raised, abuse we've dealt with, bad relationships we've endured. What's the starting point for that stuff that's beyond our control?
Yeah, the place that I like to start a lot is kind of mapping out the three E's of trauma: event, experience, and effect. It's a lot of like I like to explain trauma that way. Um, I mean, we can dive into that too, but I like to map those things out because trauma, big T or little t, is different for everybody. And so the example I like to give is like a house fire. If your house is on fire, that is the event. The experience of it's your house is I got to get my kids, I got to get my dog. It's traumatic. And then the effect could be PTSD, could be anxiety in the future, right? You're terrified. But what if you're the firefighter? Same house fire, same event, but the experience builds resilience because it's another fire they're going into and they've done it 1,000 times. And then the effect, or sorry, their experience of it is they're excited to get to solve this problem. It's a puzzle, not a problem to the firefighter. And then the effect is that it builds resilience. It's another fire, it's a learning experience. And so, same event, two different people, completely different effects. And so, mapping that out is one of the first things that I like to talk about. And that's where like traditional like cognitive behavioral therapy, because we use all sorts of different techniques, but CBT, DBT, like dialogue behavioral therapy, like all sorts of different types of psychotherapy is really, really good to kind of have a conversation about like what's going on and figuring out what's your objective, what's the result, like what is this holding you back from, and then being able to create a goal to get to. So if there's a past relationship that you had, like you've been in, because we like overwhelmingly the people we work a lot with are people after the breakups or after divorce, specifically after narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things would be considered trauma. So the first step that I would take with those people is like, okay, what is that breaking a trauma bond is number one for them. But after that, it's like, who am I? What are my boundaries? What do I like? What do I want to be? Right. And those are things that they don't have access to, or they lost access to. They're still in there, but
Mm-hmm.
they lost access to those things and they're missing out on those pieces and parts of their life. And so mapping out really specifically what's going on, what's the problem, like general problems. have general solutions. Specific problems have specific solutions. And so that's like the number one thing that I do is really sift through all of the stuff and figure out, okay, what is the problem that you're truly having? What is it holding you back from? And then how do we solve for that?
And what does that usually look like? Say you're working with someone who, in the example you just gave, is coming out of a negative relationship, whether they experienced abuse of some sort, or maybe it just wasn't a quote unquote successful relationship in their minds. What are some ways to start moving beyond that trauma?
Right. So one of the biggest things, an easy example is a trauma bond. The trauma bond is created from like an abuse love cycle in your brain. And so it's essentially a fight or flight cortisol type response. And then it is dampened down with oxytocin and love and all that kind of stuff, whether it's and that back up and forth creates an addiction pattern.
Hmm.
And so strangely enough, after narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse, it's almost like you're addicted to that person, literally, or to that cycle. And so you go through withdrawal, which is anxiety, which is feels like stress. And so that's an example of one of the first places that I'll go through is like, okay, how can we start to dissect? First of all, help you understand what a trauma bond is neurologically, and then
Hmm.
start to understand where do you feel it in your body specifically. Trauma is stored in the body most often. People think that a lot of it's stored in your brain, but only one type of memory is in your brain. Four types of memory are in your body, and so really starting to understand where they feel that trauma bond, where they're feeling the anxiety, the stress, that whatever it is that they're the fear, terror, where are they feeling it for themselves, and then zoning in on the body part or area, and helping them, like we just talked about, name entertainment. So
Hmm.
name that anxiety, name that beast, that enemy, and then create a hero to help them. Who do you want to become like? Who is someone that sets awesome boundaries? Who like one of the ladies I work with, uh, there's two badasses that she uses. Michelle Obama is one to protect her peace, like get out of here, and then Oprah is another one that people have become. And so it's name entertainment, and then creating a hero so that they can become something and start to act in a different way. Those would be some of the first steps that I would suggest when I'm working with someone.
What about relationships with narcissists? This is a topic in and of itself, I'm certain, but it's a topic that's really popular lately. People are always wondering, with the sort of awareness around this condition now, are the people that I'm interacting with falling under this category? How do we, if at all, recover from narcissistic, one sided relationships? And the additional question I have for you is that person who's the narcissist ever curable?
Yeah, that is one of the most interesting debates in like all of psychotherapy and psychology. So that's cool. But we can talk about that as far as are they curable. The as far as if are you with a narcissist or different things like that, I sometimes have a hard time because I feel like the word gets used a lot,
Yeah.
when in reality it is statistically 1, 2-ish%. And so because people who have narcissistic tendencies, is that's not the same as being a true narcissist. And so I have people that reach out to me like, am I a narcissist? Like, and it's like, narcissists don't generally think or worry about being a narcissist. So you're probably not a narcissist. And so, and there's just a lot of people that take individual one or two tendencies, and create a complete narcissist out of that person. And so that'd be the first thing that I would really, really like hit the brake pedal a little bit. Not everybody is a narcissist. People have narcissistic tendencies, absolutely. And I work with people who have been with true narcissists, and I see the effect that a real narcissist has on someone. Um, Outside of even being a narcissist, emotional abuse by itself. You don't have to be a narcissist to be emotionally abusive to someone. That's I like separating those things is so freaking important because like it's not mutually exclusive, and that's
Right.
frustrating to me sometimes.
Let's hop in though and tell me what are some true characteristics of a true narcissist so we can identify this in our life.
Yeah, so a true narcissist, the biggest one that I would is lack of empathy, especially with it's easy with kids. It's easy, or a way to sneak into it is like you're watching a movie with somebody, you pause the movie and you ask, "How do you think that character is feeling?" And if they're like, "I don't care, I don't know," like, "Why are you asking? Leave me alone." Like they have a hard time empathizing, and trying to guess or imagine what that other person could feel like, and so. Um, If they're, oh my God, they just let's pretend they just lost a family member. Oh my God, I feel terrible. I can't believe, like, if I lost my parent, I feel so bad. Like, and they can start to understand. So lack of empathy is a big one. I mean, some of the other ones, like a grandiose narcissist is very self-centered. They're very much about themselves. Um, and they have just a lack of general care for other people. That's a huge one. And they want a lot of attention. That's a big thing. Like, it's all about me. Um, they want to be more interesting than interested. So they're not asking you a lot of questions. Over time, up front, they will, which can be kind of scary. If someone's asking you a shit ton of questions, like on the first date, like they're trying to get pieces of information they can use to manipulate you and love bomb you more effectively. So that's actually, now that I'm saying out loud, kind of a twofer, because up front they'll ask you lots of questions and then they'll disappear, or not disappear, but they'll stop asking questions, stop caring as much, and they'll start using the things you gave them against you. Um, so those would be some big picture ones I would suggest to kind of watch out for. I'd have to look at the DSM,
Right.
for each individual, because there's like 10 characteristics that specifically create a narcissist. So I have to look at that because I don't know off the top of my head.
Those are no, those are three really good identifying factors. And can we recover from relationships with true narcissists?
Yo, 100%. Yes, 1,000%. Humans are people in general are so much more resilient than I feel like most people give themselves credit for. Themselves or other people. Like, we are badasses. We have survived a long time. Like, you can survive anything. Like, it gets better, I promise. Like, your brain is plastic your entire life. Um, yes, you can.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the crazy stories of mental and physical recovery from Holocaust survivors.
Right.
One of literally probably one of the most, if not the most, devastating events in recent history that really caused people to dig down to the bottom of the barrel for courage and survival. And I
That's right.
just continue to be inspired. I'm like, read a lot of, history, and wow, it's really remarkable what people can recover from. I did want to ask this because we touched on it and I don't want to forget. We talked about narcissists ever recovering themselves. You said there was some
Mm.
debate, but just so that we can put a bow on this before we move on.
Oh, for sure. So yeah, there is a lot of debate on whether or not a narcissist can actually get better or not. A lot of what people think is that they cannot. There's no recovering and no getting better. So that's a lot of what the research says. There is newer research, though, if there's a willingness. With all of this out there, and even even us, we get people that reach out to us that say, I am a narcissist and I want to get better. And if they have a
Hmm.
consistent willingness and want and desire to get better, my personal belief is that they can recover and start to get better. And in some of the work that I have done, I've seen some of those things. There will be a default to the mean, so like a default back to those tendencies.
Hmm.
But if they are willing to do the work and really, really focus on building EQ, like emotional intelligence, especially, like that helps everything else. If they're willing to focus and learn those skills, I think they can recover. And I've seen
Hmm.
narcissists make gigantic recoveries that I've worked with personally. So there's a bunch of debate. It's open research, I would say.
Awesome. Well, that's a positive way to look at it. I'm all for
Mm-hmm.
the glass half full approach. I want to move on to the topic of brain inflammation, and I know that this is a big part of how you sort of intake some of your clients. We run through a quick survey, and you see what type of brain inflammation you might be dealing with. What I didn't know before I was started clicking through your site and your course was that trauma or depression or anxiety can create that physical impact of inflammation in the brain. I didn't really associate the
Yep.
two, but does everybody have inflammation in some way in their brains?
Yeah, almost. Yes, just to be blunt, and that's not bad. There's inflammation that
Okay.
builds up in your brain throughout the day, general stress, normal stress that sleep takes care of. And so inflammation
Hmm.
overall gets demonized a lot, but it's not as bad as it seems. It's really, really good for helping you heal in certain situations when it's not chronic. The problem becomes when it's chronic and doesn't go away,
Mm.
and becomes to where it's so much that your brain and body can't clear it out effectively. That's when it gets really, really bad. And so the way that I like to think about it is like your body is the soil for your brain, and your brain is the soil for your mind. And so if your body is a toxic wasteland, your brain is sitting in a toxic wasteland. And that is what's creating that inflammation, if you will. So if you're not exercising, you're not eating right, you're not socially connecting, you're not having time where you play and have Sony time or Cody time, you're not doing something for your mind, those types of things, your body starts to become
Hmm.
like toxic soil. That's bottom up. That's the first 6 areas that I focus on when I work with somebody. Um, and so that creates a crappy environment for your brain. And then your mind can also create this environment, those ants, automatic negative thoughts that continue to ruminate and run in your mind constantly, like always thinking about that past thing. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I can't do this. People hate me. I know I'm not lovable. Creates an environment in your brain that creates an toxic, inflamed state in your brain as well, because it puts your body or your brain into kind of that fight or flight mode. And so something called your HPA axis, um, it turns on and is hyper upregulated when your thoughts are that negative. And so that turns on your fight or flight mode, your autonomic nervous system, which releases cortisol, epinephrine, the stress chemicals and that's when people are talking about inflammation. A lot of times that's what they're talking about is stress chemicals like cortisol, epinephrine. And the scariest part about that is that those are released in your body and in your brain, but they both can get in through your blood-brain barrier, which can get into
Hmm.
your actual brain, which can get into your actual brain structures. And as your body is sitting in that, just like a plant wilts when it's not in fertile ground, that's what starts to happen to your brain. And so then
Hmm.
all these things that your mind is feeling, anxiety, stress, depression, memory loss, brain fog, mood swings, insomnia, freaking name them all, all of those types of things can start to happen when inflammation in your brain gets too high. Um, it's chronic. And so the biggest disclaimer I'll give is that this is not like meningitis, encephalitis. That is generally started virally or bacterially. That's completely different. Your meninges are a specific portion of your brain, like very different than what I'm describing. So I don't want to freak people out because sometimes they're like, oh my God, I'm going to die, because those are extraordinarily serious things. I am talking about low grade, constant, it's like drip torture for your brain, essentially. That's all I'm
Drip
talking about.
torture.
I mean, it
Life
is.
life gives me drip torture, Cody. You know,
Retweet.
yeah, seriously, that's a really good analogy. I was just at the chiropractor, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. I go all the time, but at this appointment, I have this chronic neck pain, and it's the result of my body being twisted up in so many ways. And my chiropractor said to me, which was revelatory and it shouldn't be, did you ever think that your nervous system could be causing some of this? And I was like, oh my God, my fucked up mind is actually making my body hurt, which is insane to me. But for me personally, I do think they're connected.
They are. There is nerve tissue and nerve cells in every single cell of your body.
Man, yeah. Well, I've been diving into the Calm app and really trying to make a practice out of that. I go through these, like, I'm sure everybody does, like fits and spurts of being really great at meditation, or I just call it like sort of silent time. I just sit there in my closet in the dark. But it's a habit that I've
Nice.
had a hard time sticking with beyond a couple of months. But it's really inspirational for me, to hear that kind of analysis, because now I'm realizing how intertwined they both are. And it's
A
just,
really fun one for neck pain, especially or tension pain or tension in general, is taking a couple moments to two things. If you'd like, I'm happy to share two tools. But one
please.
is kind of funny. You sit, I mean, really sit there and just imagine, sit and try to sink down into the pain that you're feeling in your neck. And after a couple seconds, some type of thought or something will come up. Almost always it does, where it's like just scream out, yell, like just go whoo, whatever. Something. It's usually something funny or just like shake or jump or whatever. It'll come to your mind. Just do it right away, and that will help release some of the energy that's stored up in there. Um, Another one that I really really love, because it's energy that's stored in there. That I use this with people when they need something really fast. And what you do is you sit, close your eyes, and then you go into wherever the tension is. So for you, it would be your neck, and you want to rate that. So 1 out of 5, like where is it? 1 to 5. If it's a 5, which is the worst, or 0 is you want to get to 0. So that's no pain, and no energy there. And so what you can start to do then is rate it, and then you imagine a metaphor. So that could be anything. It could be a picture, it could be a sound, it could be a color, whatever. Some people, like I did this yesterday with one of my clients, and it was a knife for her that was stuck in her stomach. or sorry, her lower, the right side of her lower back. I mean, it was a knife. And so what you do is you imagine that knife coming out of you, pulling it out from the top of your head, putting it in front of you, and then destroying it. However you want to destroy it. You have laser beams come out of your palms and it blows up the knife, whatever. And then what you do is you re-rate. So you go back into your body and like, okay, where am I at now? Almost always after you do that, it'll go down a point or two at a time. And what you want to do is redo that over and over and over until it gets to zero. And it's it's kind of a fun way to go from your body through your brain, out your mind, destroy it, and it helps your body calm down.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like we're on the precipice of some really interesting discoveries that we've always known anecdotally, but about the power of the brain and mindset over physical health, which you always
Oh,
would hear these
yes.
one off stories, about people who have cancer who miraculously survive or the growth stops and reverses. And it's always been a sort of one off, one in a million kind of scenario. But with the awareness that I think we humans as a species are moving toward with spirituality and meditation, I really feel like there is a moment on the horizon where we're going to begin to harness this in a powerful way. And excuse me if that sounds woo woo, but I do feel
No,
a collective awakening happening.
it's true. Scientifically, it's happening as well. It's under the surface, and most people aren't looking at research around this, but it's called biofield. The biofield is the energetic field that's around your body that you can manipulate and can affect physical, like reality. There's
Stop.
hardcore science. Healing Yourself is a book about this. The doctor that's in it had a Reiki experience. She's a hardcore physicist and psychoneuroimmunologist. And she had a crazy experience with Reiki, and now she spent the rest of her life um, trying to figure that out. And so the biofield is what she describes and is the scientific term for what you're describing. It's absolutely true. She cites hundreds and hundreds of research articles. It's not one in a million. There's a specific process. Like this is some of the stuff that I get most passionate about because it's like how your brain really can start to affect physical reality. Like this woo woo type stuff has more science behind it than people really think. And we're just now getting our rational like tools, scientific method wrapped around it.
Yeah, it's so cool that at Rewrite and Rise you're able to quantify some of that because I do think there's a group of people who needs convincing that there's data behind this. So it's really cool how you're able to marry that concept with
Yeah,
the science because sometimes we need proof.
yeah, I'm one of those people. I 100%. I mean, like, man, I would poke Jesus too if I was Thomas. It's like, what the heck's going on? Like, I feel that.
Yeah, you gotta have questions, and you have to. I do at least have to understand the whys before I hop on board with anything. Cody, I feel like we could talk forever, but we have to wrap. I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you for breaking down some really complex things into really workable and practical tips for everyone. So please let us know where we can connect with you if we're interested in working with you, and where we can find more of your great content.
Yeah, so My Brain Body Lab on TikTok is the best place. We post on there like 2, 3 times a day most of the time. We do lives, all sorts of stuff. That's a really good spot for us. And then our website's always a great place too, rewriteandrise.com. And I appreciate you jumping on. You didn't have to pick me. There's 7 billion people on Earth, so I appreciate you taking a moment to check out some of our stuff and take a moment to invite me to come on to your platform and share space with you and your people.
I appreciate it so much, Cody. Thank you.
Heck yeah, thank you.
And thank you guys for watching and or listening. Gosh, this was a good one. Um, I wish we had more time to dive into that last topic that we were talking about, this great awakening. But who knows? Maybe we'll find someone to chat about that with in upcoming episodes. If you haven't done so already, please leave a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That makes a huge difference, and I would be so grateful for it. You can find us on Instagram at Sunny Abata or We Gotta Talk with Sunny. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week with more good stuff here on We Gotta Talk.